Hi, my name is Steve Ingram, and about a month ago, I developed a sudden and unexpected interest in the penny whistle. And somehow, in the first month, I've ended up with a whole bunch of penny whistles. Now, this is, if you hang around with whistle folk, this is fairly common behavior. So I thought, since I've got all these whistles, and since I'm just a beginner and I'm just learning to play, and it's all fresh in my mind, maybe I would make a little video about my process of picking a first whistle, what I'm looking for, what I've learned that I'm looking for over the last month, and which of these whistles actually suits me as a beginning whistler. The truth is, you could learn to play any of these whistles. I've seen videos online of people playing each one of them and making good music with it. So it's not a matter of whether or not you can learn with these whistles. It's a matter of which one might be easiest for you to learn on. Penny whistle is a fairly simple instrument. It should be relatively easy to play. I mean, after all, you've only got 8 notes. You've got 6 holes, all the holes covered. That's 1 note. On 1 hole uncovered, that's 2 notes on up the scale. And then you push a little harder to get the second octave. So you have 16 notes to deal with. My way of thinking about it after a month now is that you blow the low notes, or on some whistles you just breathe them. But for the second octave, you have to whistle. You have to hold your mouth slightly different, force the air out at a higher speed in order to create the higher note. But at any rate, it's only 16 notes, and anybody, even a person of limited musical ability like myself, should be able to get their head around 16 notes. But of course, there's more to it than that. All whistles are not created equal, and some whistles, especially for a beginner, are easier to play than others. What are my criteria for easy to play? Well, it'd be nice to have a whistle that had a good first octave and a good second octave. Now, by a good first octave, I mean beginning with a solid bell note. Now, the bell note is the lowest note on the whistle. It's the one you play with all 6 holes covered. It's called the bell note because, in pipe terms, this is the bell of the pipe. And on many inexpensive whistles, it seems to be a characteristic of inexpensive whistles, the bell note can be very delicate. It pops up very easily into the second octave or toward the second octave into that never, never land in between, and squeaks and squawks, especially when you're coming down the scale from higher notes to lower. It's sometimes very difficult to hit that low note and to keep it in the right octave. So that's one thing, a good bell note and then a good solid first octave, going right up to the C sharp. This is the bell note. And as you blow harder, as you blow faster, it pops up to the second octave. On some whistles, like this Walton Melody, that bell note is relatively easy to play. On others, like this Dixon 001 cast plastic whistle, you can barely breathe into the whistle before the bell note pops up. And coming down the scale can be really tricky. That makes a difference in how easy the whistle is to play for a beginner. That breath control that you need to keep those low notes where they belong is something every whistle player needs to learn. I'm just not sure you need to learn it in the first month. It would be wonderful to have a whistle that had an easy bell note and a clear, crisp first octave. Then, of course, the other thing you want is a good second octave. And it's kind of a trade-off. You know, if your whistle has a delicate bottom note, bell note, then chances are it also has a very easy second octave. And this whistle, again, the Dixon, which I struggle with the bell note on, has among the easiest second octaves of any whistle that I've ever tried. Those are my criteria. Good solid bell note, an easy second octave, and a nice tone. So then, just kind of running through the whistles in the order I bought them, again, in search of that balance between a good first octave, a good second octave, and a nice tone. I already mentioned the Tony Dixon 001, cast plastic whistle, lovely mellow tone. However, very difficult to play the bottom notes. So maybe not the best whistle to begin on. The Clark, which I bought at the same time on the advice of one of the internet sites, which said to always buy 2 whistles so that you can tell whether it's you or the whistle. The Clark is very similar. It has a very, very delicate low note. It also has a nice mellow tone, but it's very difficult to play the low notes. On the other hand, this is among the easiest whistles to get up into the second octave and even the third octave. The other thing that I didn't like about the Clark Sweet Tone is these relatively small holes. Surprisingly, I found the smaller holes harder to cover than the bigger holes on some of the other whistles. And then there's the seam in the back. For some reason, that bothered me as well. It just didn't feel right under my thumb. And then I got this Woodeye. Now, this is a slightly different design. It is a tunable whistle. The head comes off, and you can actually move it in and out to tune the whistle. I was not actually too concerned about the tunability of the whistle. I had decided right away that whether or not the whistle is in tune to concert pitch was not very important to me. I'm not going to be playing with other people right away. I'm going to be practicing on my own. And as long as the whistle is relatively in tune to itself, that's enough for me. Now, this whistle, in contrast to the Tony Dixon plastic whistle, has an incredibly solid bell note and first octave. It's much more difficult to get into the upper register, into the second octave with this whistle than it is with some of the others. In fact, I have not been able to get the C sharp into the second octave at all, and the B is difficult. That's the top 2 notes. How much does that matter? Most of the music you're going to learn as a beginner is not going to use those 2 notes at all in the second octave. So maybe not so important after all. If you want a whistle that is just dead easy to play, very loud, it has a kind of a plasticky tone, so it doesn't have a lot of resonance, but it has very clear notes, then this might be the whistle that you want to consider. The price is right, as long as you don't need those upper notes in the second octave. This is the Walton Melody. I ordered it because they said that you could overblow it. They said the bell note was relatively solid, and the first octave was very good, and the second octave was there. Also because it's reputed to have a much more mellow tone. Notice it has a bigger bore. That's how big around the tube is. In fact, I can put my generation right inside the Waltons. It does have a nice mellow tone. It also does have a very solid first octave. You have to push considerably harder to get into the second octave, especially in the upper notes. But they're there and you can do it. Overall, this is a very playable whistle. However, it doesn't sound very good on the upper notes, at least out of the box. Then the generation, again, against a lot of recommendations on the internet, I went ahead and ordered a generation just to see what it's like, since so many people have started out on the generation whistle. And to my surprise, I found that this was among the best balanced between the octaves of any of the whistles that I tried. It has a very nice bell note that is a little delicate, but still manageable. And it has a very good second octave. And it has a relatively good tone. So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend the generation. Now, you may get a good one and you may get a bad one. That's the reputation they have. But I got a good one. And it is among the most easy whistles to play that I ordered. This is a Feeddog. And we had to have a Feeddog in the test because this is another whistle that many people start out with. It's kind of almost the original Irish whistle made in Ireland, along with the Generations, about the same time. And they're very similar design. And its characteristics are very similar to the Generation. It's a little more delicate to play. The bell note is not as solid, and the first octave not as easy. The second octave also is not quite as easy as it is on the Generation, but overall, a playable whistle. And then, of course, I had to have a handmade whistle. I found this gentleman online, Mr. Becker from Williamsburg, Missouri, who makes handmade PVC whistles. Now, these whistles are a work of craftsmanship. This is not expensive. This is actually around the same price as any of these other beginning whistles, but it's a handmade whistle. Take a look at it closely. You see that the holes are undercut, which helps with the tuning of the individual notes. The blade is hand-shaped so that it produces the best tone. The windway is curved, so it helps with condensation and with the clarity of the notes. A true handmade whistle. And again, for $13.50 with shipping, so $10 for this handmade whistle. As you would expect, very well balanced between the octaves. The lower octave is solid. The upper octave takes a little more push than some of the whistles, certainly than the sweet tone, for instance, but it's there, it's solid, and it can be played easily. The only drawback is that top C is a little reedy. You have to blow a little harder to get it clear. And that requires a little more breath control again. But the trade-offs are acceptable, and it is an excellent whistle to begin with. So then I thought, well, what if I spent twice as much? What if I got a factory-made, but hand-finished and hand-tuned whistle from Tony Dixon? And this is the Tony Dixon Trad. It is the nickel trad. It has a solid nickel body, not nickel-plated brass, but a solid nickel body. And it does have a completely tunable head. And as you would expect, for twice the price, it is a whole different class of whistle. This is what I consider a well-behaved whistle. It has a nice, solid bell note. Again, it's a little delicate. It is a Dixon, so the bell note is a little delicate, but it is nice and clear and solid. The first octave is wonderful. The second octave is easy. You can get into the third octave by hardly pushing any harder. So, an excellent whistle. And again, people have said online, if they discovered this whistle first, they never would have had to buy another whistle, even one of the professional level, much more expensive whistles. Among the whistles that I bought, the ones I'm going to keep are my Tony Dixon Trad and the Becker. Those are the ones that are going to go on with me as my learning whistles. Doesn't mean I couldn't be perfectly happy and learn to play on the Walton, which is also an excellent whistle, or the Generation. The Feeddog, well, it's a good whistle, but maybe not one that I want to learn on. The Woodeye, I just don't enjoy the tone as much of this plastic whistle as I do some of the others, and since you have to struggle to get up to those highest notes in the second octave, unless I wanted something to just pick up and play immediately without much study, the Woodeye would not be the whistle I bought. The Clark and the Dixon 001, to me, just too delicate on the bell note in order for me to really be happy trying to learn to play them. Now, it might be good for me in the long run to learn to play these, and I'll keep the Dixon for that reason, just to practice my breath control. But to practice every day, learn new songs on, probably not the whistle I'm going to pick up. The whistle I'm going to pick up will be the Dixon Trad or the Becker. Or, depending on the tune, maybe even the Walton's Melody or the Generation. So there you have it. That's my take on a beginning whistle. You can disagree, and a lot of people will disagree, but For what it's worth, as a beginner, as one beginner to another, that's my take. And remember, there's always time to whistle, and I hope you enjoyed this. Here's a little footnote, an addenda for you. Any of these whistles with the cast plastic head can be improved just slightly or sometimes considerably with a little simple tweak. It's called the blue tack tweak, and I'm going to go over it in another video. So don't give up on your Waltons or your Generation or your Feeddog until you've at least tried a little tweak.